Welcome. In this video, we're going to continue work on developing our Quarto website. And up to this point, we created a Quarto website locally on our computer or remotely in Posit Cloud using our studio. And we were able to render that on our computer to a website. Then we talked about how we can push those changes into GitHub and host that website in GitHub pages publicly and take a look at that. And we've talked about the kind of workflow for how we can make changes locally on our computer and then push those changes to the GitHub version. So I'm going to change the workflow a little bit so that I'm not constantly making changes and then pushing them to GitHub, updating the website, and then, hey, I want to make another change, change it locally, push it to GitHub. So I'm just going to work locally on my computer in our studio, editing these Quarto files and editing the Quarto YAML. Once I've got the web page looking nice on my computer and I'm all finished with it, I'm going to push multiple changes all at once to GitHub and then update the website in GitHub. But I'm not going to keep going back and forth. I'm just going to stay on my computer, editing multiple files. And then once I've got the web page looking nice on my computer, I'll push it back into GitHub. So we don't need to mess with GitHub for a little bit. We're just going to work in our studio and look at the website locally on our computer. So what I'd like to talk about next is how we can add pages to our website. So right now, my website looks like this, and I've got two pages, a home page and an about page, and I actually haven't done anything to the about page. We can click on it, and it looks, it's just the default template over there. So I've got a home page, and I've got an about page. And one thing that's interesting is that this about page, it does not have the updated title because I would need to render each individual QMD file to make sure that I update the title on each of them. So that's a good point to make over here. But I'm actually not going to use this about page, and I'm going to add a second page or another page to this website, which is called favorites. And I'm going to tell everybody what are my favorite dog breeds and what are my favorite characters from the Lord of the Rings, because this is going to be really important for my employer to know, right? They're going to want to know all about my favorite things before they hire me. So that is not included on my personal website at the moment. So let me go into RStudio. Wrong RStudio. Let me go into RStudio where I was working with this project. So here's the index QMD and here's the Quarto YAML. I haven't done anything with the about QMD, but if I want to kind of update the title on that page, I can render this one as well. And this might open it on my computer in a second. It did in the web browser in the background. I'm not seeing that here. That's fine. But what I want to do right now is create a new page on my website. So I'm going to go into the File menu, choose New File, and choose a new Quarto document. So each page is going to be a separate Quarto file. So I'm going to call this page favorites because I'm going to write all about my favorite stuff. I don't need to specify an author if I don't want to. I don't need an author here. I want this to be rendered to HTML. So I want to select that option because I'm building a website. I'm going to use the knitter engine. Over here, I can check this option. It's going to change whether or not we open the Quarto document in source mode or in visual mode. So in source mode, you're working with raw markdown. In visual mode, you're working with the rendered markdown. I prefer working in source mode, so I am not going to check this box. You can do as you prefer. And then I'm going to click create a empty document so that there was no like template stuff down below. I think otherwise it will add this stuff if you create a document which is not blank. But here I've got a blank Quarto document. Right now it's called untitled. So I'm going to go ahead and save this file. I'll click the disk over there. And what's really important is I want to save, I can call it whatever I like, but I need to save it in the main home demo site directory. So it needs to be in the same directory as the Quarto YAML and in the same directory as the index QMD file and all of the other Quarto files that are used for the other pages. So I'm going to call this favorites.qmd, and I'm going to store it in the main directory, the main demo site directory. And now you can see this file appears in the files panel, and the name changed up here. So now I've got a new page, favorites, and I can add some text to that page if I want to, and I do. So let's say I want to let everybody know, first of all, about my favorite dog breeds. So I'm sure you all have been wondering, and you might have heard my dogs bark on some of these videos, so I apologize. But one of my dogs is a Greater Swiss Mountain Dog. My other dog, I thought I was getting a chocolate lab, but turns out we rescued the dog. And the dog was a pit bull mixed with a lab, and she's the best dog ever. So my favorite breed is any mixed breed. I think they make great dogs. Okay, enough about me or my dogs. But what you're also curious about is I am a fan of the Tolkien books, Lord of the Rings, great set of movies. Before you hire me, you might want to know who my favorite characters are. My favorite Lord of the Rings characters are Samwise Gamgee, Gimli, the dwarf, and everybody's favorite villain, Gollum, who's just a really misunderstood character. So those are my favorite characters from Lord of the Rings. So I'm going to save these changes, and I'm going to render the favorites QMD file. Let's take a look at what was created. This was created in the docs menu, is where these HTML files are being created. And then I can click on this and view this in the browser. And I'll pull my browser in over here. So this is what got created. You can see the title got updated. The title of this web page is favorites. These are my favorite dog breeds. These are my favorite characters. So all that information is updated over here. But this is not going to be included in the main website until I indicate this as an additional web page. So here I've got my website, and underneath here is where I can list all of the pages that I want to add. So right now it's saying that index is representing the home page. So this is the landing page. Whenever I go to aspiegler.github.io/demo site, it's going to take me to the index page, what happens when I rendered the index QMD file. And then I can add additional pages over here. So now you can see the about page, where that came from. So all I want to do is add an additional page here, which is the favorites QMD file. So now I'm going to add an additional page to that. I'm going to save this file, and now I'm going to render the index file. And this is creating a new website. I'll click on this to open this in a web browser. And now you can see here's the main web page. And now I've got a home page, an about page, and a favorites page over here as well. But notice I don't have a favorites link in the favorites page, and I don't have a favorites link in the about page either. So if I want to reflect those changes, then I need to go ahead and render this file. I need to render this file. And I need to render this file. And now when I come back over here, sorry, where did it go? Let me open that website again. I'm going to open up index in the web browser. Here you can see the web page favorites got added. here the web page favorites got added, and here the web page favorites got added. So I made that change to the Quarto YAML file, and then I needed to render all of the Quarto files for that page to be added on top of every single one of them. Okay, so that is how you can add a web page to your website. I'll go back into RStudio. And again, what we did is we added a new file. We called it favorites. We added that into the main directory. And we added whatever text we wanted, but then we needed to also instruct the Quarto website to include that as a link on the main web page. And so the way we do that is over here. And if I want to remove things, I can delete them or I can comment them out. So if I put a %, notice everything gets greened out. And this is like a comment like you have in code. So this is going to ignore this command, and it would not include the about page on the website. So you can add pages, you can remove pages by editing the Quarto YAML file. Okay, so that's a wrap for this video. In the next videos, we'll get into talking about how we can change the style of the website.